Hi, my name is Jayakumar Hariharan. I'm an executive coach, speaker, and author. Stories That Shift is a series of intimate and up close conversations with CXOs and various practitioners about what makes them tick. Stories are not what we say, stories are who we are. Full disclosure for viewers and people who are listening to the podcast, I am a member, I'm a proud alumni of the Leadership School of the Indian Express Group. And that gives you a clue as to who my guest is. My guest on this show is Anant Goenka, Executive Director, the Indian Express Group. Anant, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be talking to you, Jay.
So I have a lot of fond memories of working with Express. And in the course of the conversation, if I happen to lapse into nostalgia, please bear with me. Because as I've evolved as a leader and as somebody now who has a practice working with a lot of CXOs, I definitely go back to my formational years and I pass on whatever I learned from the group. So immensely grateful for that opportunity. With that out of the way, I'm very excited to hear from you in the last 6 months. What has been exciting at the group and what do you do at the Express?
Wow. What I do at the Express, it's been 11 years and I still don't know what I do, to be honest. I think when you join a set, an institution which has been around, it'll be a 90th year next year. So I think an institution which has been around, for 80 years before you kind of formally step in, especially in a family business, it's not very simple. It's not very like, here's a job description you've been recruited for, here are your KRAs. It's not really like that. And I think anybody who thinks it's like that or who sort of wants it to be like that is a little fooling themselves. And I'm talking, Indian Express in that sense is a small organization compared to, if you look at the larger scheme of things. We're not as big an organization as so many which are still, in a sense, family run.
Sure.
Who are just businesses. We think of ourselves beyond as, our business is actually a means to an end. We're actually in the business of journalism, business of news. So that we define ourselves more as journalists than we do as business people, but it is a business. But if you look at the just typical family business organizations, I see a lot of people coming and saying, okay, the next generation's in and they're going to be in charge of X or in charge of that department or in charge of that thing. It happened with me. I joined, I was made to be in charge of digital. But really what I think it is that your strength as a family, as a stakeholder, as a family member of the family of the family that controls the business, is just that you are the owner, is that you have that ownership. If something is going wrong, nobody's heart's going to bleed as much as yours.
Gotcha.
And so what happens then is that you kind of go around finding voids to fill, you kind of go around finding problems to solve. And the trick is being able to do that without sort of rocking the boat of an organization that has been going on for all these years. So you want to solve problems without upsetting people. You want to solve problems without stepping on toes.
Gotcha.
You want to solve problems. You want to firstly find problems. It's very easy to kind of go into an 80-year-old organization and then say, here are the strength areas, here are the weakness areas. But in the larger scheme of things are going fine. You're growing at a Hindu rate of growth and you're perfectly okay. And, you can just kind of do that. But if you don't make the effort to find those problems and then solve them, you're not really being an owner. You're not really sort of having, your heart's not really in the business or really in the mission of the organization that you've joined. So if you ask me, I was asked to join digital. I was asked to run the digital business because that was a problem. The digital side, when I joined 11 and a half years ago, there was no vision, there was no mission, there was no direction, there was no interest. And my father, who's the chairman of the organization, was always very sort of loved tech.
Absolutely.
He always
Absolutely.
loved. We were the first to have a website in India. The first news site in India was expressindia.com.
Yep.
I don't know your vintage. You look
No,
like
no,
you're my age,
no.
so I don't know what you're. I don't know what time you were there when you
I
saw.
was very much there when I saw it happen. Beautiful. Really good times.
We were the first to have a facsimile edition.
Yes.
At that time it was called that. We were the first to have, my dad was the first to actually move from the old, I don't know when you walked in, but probably saw this old press machine. When you walked into the lobby, there was this old black machine that kind of, you would put a plate, the plate
And
had a
perforations.
perforation and
Got
that would
it,
get
got it.
stamped
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
page.
yeah, yeah.
He was the first to digitize that. First in India to do it. So he loved tech. Somewhere, obviously, tech didn't work out. He lost out on it. We lost out on it. So he wanted me to do that because there was no thing in digital. And so I did focus on digital. And that was, but then, you realize that, I'm focusing on digital like as one sort of IndianExpress.com, FinancialExpress.com, and just the website. And you think of it as a different edition or another edition from the newspaper. And then you said, and then I was like, but digital doesn't mean just a website. Digital means a really different way of thinking. The problem is, for some time we were a silo, but the larger problem is the whole organization needs to think digital. And for that to happen, it can't be a silo. So you go around finding problems in each department. So digital is a word, but
Yes.
what digital really means is future. So you kind of go around saying, how do you future-proof every department in the organization? And so I think that's what I've been doing. And I must say, I'm not at all happy with the progress that I have personally made in it. Like, I think there's so much to be done. Certainly we've done well. We've got a certain formidable presence on the digital medium. We're doing 200 million users. We are in 7 languages. If I don't count last year, we've always been profitable. Last year was a very bad year for us on digital. But otherwise, we've always been profitable. We're one of the few organizations that have sustainably grown. So the fact that, when I joined, we were doing about 1.5 million users a month. Last year we ended at 200 million users a month.
Wow.
In 7 languages.
Wow.
I didn't grow the internet user base, so I don't get credit for that. But at least we were riding the wave.
You're riding the wave, yeah.
Which, I think if we didn't all focus on it, we wouldn't have
Absolutely.
done that. So we have been part of the journey, and it's very sort of, you can always kind of say, okay, where we were, where we are now, but the truth is there's so much more to do, and there's so much more, especially in the digital space. There's, if you take it easy, you take your foot off the gas with 2 or 3 months, you'll feel there's somebody
Immediately.
kind of coming through. Like, for instance, I can tell you, yesterday it has really sunk into me about just how much better Hindustan Times is doing on its video compared to us. And when I joined, obviously we were nowhere, but then, in the middll of my career, my 11-year career, but if I get into, 3 or 4 years into it, when we beat HT, which is a much larger newspaper
200%.
nationally,
Yep.
when we beat them on digital, we kind of just kept growing, and they were not keeping up. And I remember at one point there was a lot of surprise in the industry and about, hey, Express is bigger than HT on digital. And then there was like an acceptance key, like, of course Express is bigger than HT on digital. So that I saw that kind of happen. And then I saw them again kind of catch up with us while we hadn't dropped so much, but they grew. And specifically on the video side, which I've always felt that we've struggled with. Video, I'm giving an example only.
No,
and
interesting.
there are many
Yeah,
examples like this.
yeah.
But on the video play, HT really got it right. And they were investing and trying for years, and they were never really, that was really clicking. But finally, somewhere it clicked. And you just realize that, we really shouldn't have dropped the ball on it. But we did. We dropped the ball on video, clearly. Distracted with too many things at the same time, whatever. I don't know what the reasons are. Just to say that, there is never a situation where you can say, ho gaya.
Digital is
where
different,
now autopilot. I think that will never happen. I don't know in other industries, I don't know other companies, but I don't think it'll happen anywhere.
Absolutely.
I think you have to always be on it. You have to always be sort of a little insecure about your position. You have to always be hungry to grow, but also insecure about where you are. You have to, it keeps you on your toes. Certainly in the digital space, I can tell you, uh, you can't even rest for even 3 months if you think that autopilot pe chalega. I think you're fooling yourself.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so you asked me, what do you do? What have you done for the last 6 months?
I mean, what are the wins you'd like to celebrate? Some high points that have happened in the life of Express, and
I'll tell you, I think one of the big wins, and it's tough to kind of say, but since it's a long conversation, we
Sure.
can get deep into things. And there was I remember I had a session with my chief editor, my father, my CEO, a bunch of us, kind of just 4-5 of us sat down. And I was just kind of saying that, somewhere the consumer, the reader is not in our decision making, is not central to our decision making as a content producer. Somewhere, the user wants this, he wants to talk about climate change, he wants to talk about artificial intelligence, he wants to talk about mental health, he wants to talk about, gender issues and, the taboos with, being sexually experimental. That's kind of where the English speaking urban Express profile reader is. And we're kind of, in a sense, still trying to make them read about, one is our politics is great,
Yes.
and that's a super thing, and that's great. But we're also trying to make them read about, or we're investing resources in covering, that bus accident in a random rural part of India, or which are all important to do and cover. But somewhere we're not addressing these needs. And somewhere we're kind of missing this, missing them. And even if we do address their needs, and even if we do get the content that we want to get them, we're not quite able to consistently engage with that user base enough for them to recognize that, hey, in this crowded market of 1 lakh registered newspapers and 500 news channels, there is one Indian Express which is consistently giving me high quality, credible news and information on climate change. That hasn't yet happened.
Okay.
And so the reason that hasn't happened is because the consumer, we're not really thinking about it. We're saying, okay, we want to talk about climate change and we'll do 10 articles in a month and then we'll say, kaam ho gaya. But it's not really done until the user has understood that, accepted it, received it. And that's part of our job, is also to convince the user about that, not just convince ourselves that we've done what they want. So I think getting the user back into the system, I think I was struggling to explain it as a concept. It's not a big win, but I'm thrilled. And because it happened just last week, it's top of my mind. We had this 3-day session. We got this consultant from the UK. He's not the first consultant I've invited into the newsroom. He won't be the last. But he was it was the first time we did it with a large gang. And they were so receptive to the primary message, which is that, listen, the consumer is your responsibility. It's not marketing's responsibility. It's not circulation's responsibility. It's not SEO's responsibility. It's not the product team's responsibility. It's not the digital team's responsibility. It is your responsibility.
Beautiful.
And that, they really lapped it up, and they really wanted to kind of say, how do we keep that consistent relationship going with our audience? So I think a big win was, I think I've really felt a solid start of a major culture change, which I think you're like, yeah, you might say, no shit, yeah, it's, what the hell is 2023, should have happened by now. But I don't think I know of many news organizations in India that are thinking like this. Traditional news organizations that are thinking about this and that are spending the time and effort to get to the root cause of educating the core team, which has done exceptional work and has kept the organization alive to where it is today. Nobody has really paid attention to kind of, I think, making that cultural change happen emotionally from the team. I think I'm really happy that we've started that journey.
Amazing.
So it's not a win in that sense, but it's certainly for me a big win, because I really felt that change happen. I feel that change beginning to happen now after this. But otherwise, the wins are, you've been at Express. what is a win at the Indian Express, according to you? If I can, I mean, just if you
Sure.
give me a broad,
For a contextual.
just tell me when you were working here,
Sure, yeah.
what was celebrated?
All right. This is back to really interesting times. So there is a lot of lore that we kind of grew up with. It could be the coverage of the Bhagalpur blindings. It could be the coverage of the Bhopal gas tragedy. We've passed down stories where Express really stood up in all its glory and developed a contrarian voice. And this voice was like a war anthem for everybody in that ecosystem. So I used to tell my people I would never come to Express just for my money. It gave me a reason to spring up from bed and say, listen, I believe in what this institution is trying to achieve. And since it matches my sense of values, I'm really proud to get on with business. And how did this flow into advertising sales is also like an interesting segue. I remember talking to a brand called Alan Solly, which used to be around. I don't know if it's of course it's still around.
Yeah.
I was talking to the brand manager, and we started talking about numbers. And it's not a great story when you paint by numbers. And I said, you got to look at the Express consumer as an individual, as a consumer. And I said I might be pushing the envelope, but I say he has a lot in common with Alan Solly, which is unconventionality, which is a contrarian view to look at stuff, which is saying that why not? He just loved it. So he said, you're making a lot of sense. And I think we're interested in what you're saying, and let's move ahead. Let's
super.
get on.
No, that's super. I'm so happy that you were able to connect it to business.
Correct.
But I think the word that, I think is a win, from what you're saying, Bhagalpur, you're talking about, it's the word, is not, I mean, you're using the word contrarian view. I would use the word, a little bit bigger word than that, or a little bit simpler word than that, which is just impact. I'm just using the word impact. If you can be part of something where you have an impact, where you're making a difference, it's, that's a win.
I agree.
And obviously you're doing it every day as a newspaper, etc., etc. But there were a few wins that happened, because you said 6 months, I'm still sticking to your timeline. In 6 months, there are a few things that happened which just made me, which just keep reminding me and remind all of us, really, I hope, in the organization, about why we do what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Why money isn't at the center of every decision we make. And why we believe that if you stick to these things, the money will follow.
Gotcha.
And there was this incredible, very random thing, but it was an incredible impact we had. It was a 2.5 month process. We had a team of photojournalists and 2 reporters. Got a tip off about a bureaucrat shutting down a sports stadium in Delhi.
Mm-hmm.
An hour and a half before it was supposed to be shut down, so he could come and walk his dog.
Yes.
Now, it wasn't an easy story to do, because you can't go wrong with that.
Yeah.
Such an allegation you can't go wrong with. The sports team that made the complaint, or that wrote to our reporters, thought that only Express will have the courage to sit and do the story and follow up on it. Sure enough, we did. Sure enough, I mean, we had for 10 days, our photojournalist was sort of crouching in the stands, gathered his own visual evidence to say that this was actually happening consistently for a long period of time. We broke the story in the paper that morning. Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal moved immediately. By 11 o'clock, bureaucrat was transferred. And the stadium was, never going to get closed early again. But the impact was what? The impact was there were 4 teams. There was a school team, there was 2 college teams, there's 1 district team. I don't really know I can't remember right now offhand, but I know there were 4 sports teams who were able to practice 1.5 hours more than they were able to practice.
Beautiful.
They were not able to do before. That it just feels awesome. I'm going to say really like dull things, necessary. But for me, its impact is so important. It's such a driver. There was, FIFA the World Cup was happening, and we had done a series of a lot of, from your part of the country, a lot of people would kind of go to Abu Dhabi, Qatar,
Sure.
and just get and do work, construction work, whatever work, day laborers, etc. we had done a series just sort of chronicling, just documenting 5 people and many more, but we went and chased 5 laborers who went from India to Qatar to work on creating infrastructure for the World Cup, who died in Qatar, got not 1 rupee of compensation.
Oh, jeez.
Not even the courtesy of an information being given to their families that so-and-so person has passed away. So we investigated each case. One of the cases, there was this guy, he was in debt here. I think he was in Kerala. He was in debt. He moved to Qatar. He got an offer to do construction work, whatever. Firstly, the conditions with which they take care of the immigrants.
Yeah, abysmal.
I mean, in that 50-degree heat,
completely.
and they have no thing. There's no free press there. You can't complain. Nobody to talk to. Anyway, you're an immigrant. Who will you go and complain to? But the things people do for money, and they have to do for money. This guy went. He was sort of told he'd be given, I think, 12 lakh rupees a year or something like that. He was earning something very much less than that here. Jumped on a plane, went there, reached. After reaching there, he gets a letter saying, no, you're not going to get 12. You're going to get paid much less than that.
Jeez.
He said, but I'm already here. Take it. Took it. The guy committed suicide. He died by suicide in wherever he was living. These guys didn't have the courtesy. His wife is calling him, not answering his phone. Phone goes off. She somehow manages to get through the employer organization. The organization says, oh, yeah, he passed away. He died by suicide. Can you please come and take the body? This guy, they don't have the courtesy of even saying the body, forget anything else. Now, this requires reporting. I mean, this should be news. It should just become news. But
100%.
In 100%. The way in our scenario, and especially in that country where there is no thing called a journalist, nothing happens. So the fact that we were able to go, we were able to investigate, report, we got compensation from the families, not from Qatar, not from the employer, we got from the state government. Indian state government gave compensation for the death. It's just giving an example of the kind of things that, I mean, I can't use the word win, but this is the kind of stuff that keeps us going.
I think, let me rephrase that. This is much bigger than a win. And you prefaced it by saying it's a vague kind of example, but what a beautiful story.
I think my favorite one this time, I'm just thinking, we had done an investigation to, there was an investigation we did about a known smuggler who's in jail in Chennai, I think. He's in jail in Chennai, and he's a known smuggler he smuggled out 177 antiques out of India.
Yes.
We traced where all those antiques have gone, right? And we've done this whole investigation, beautiful investigation. And we also had a partner, I think we had a partnership with an American news organization, I can't remember right now, top of my head, but it was a lovely series that really got into, and literally, like I think less than 2 weeks after our report, after our investigation, which only we covered, because in this news environment, nobody wants to even touch somebody else's work in that sense. The New York Metropolitan Museum said that they are going to return 17 pieces of the 177, 17 pieces which are in their museum.
Lovely.
Just by reading the Indian Express. And we've got 17 pieces were returned. One of the most unique, cool. It's called. There's an apsara. It's called apsara. It's this beautiful wooden. It's a stone carving of this woman dancing or whatever. The Madhya Pradesh Chief Minister tweeted, sort of apsaras coming back. He was. I mean, and now I don't know, but now it's all over the news because when Modi visited in America, we were now at 100. So 100 antiques have come back.
Wow!
All of which were written in our investigation. Just the kind of things that keep us going.
No, it's amazing, and which almost takes me back, and I'm so glad to hear it. Like coming back to home. I remember at Express Towers outside the conference room, there was a quote by Ramnath Ji which said, for an endeavor to be successful, it has to become an enterprise. And I said, it just makes so much of sense. You can make the world a better place. That's your endeavor. But if you weave a business around it that supports this, it's really happy to hear you kind of reverberate the same thing, saying that let's not forget the business that we're in. And business of journalism is here. It's a means to an end. I watched a video of yours which I found disarmingly humble, just like you really are, about you wondering if the invite was for you or was it for Anant Goenka for RPG, and you kind of went on to say that this is a confederation of industries kind of an event, and I was pretty sure that it has to have gone to the other Anant, and I texted it to him, and he texted it back, no, it's for you, and then you said even amidst a lot of other successful businesses around, there are things that only a media organization can do, will do, should do, and very beautiful analogy that you compared it to the airlines kind of a thing. Can you just shed some light on it? Because my sense is that young leaders from various disciplines and domains will tune in. And I believe in a boundaryless world, it's beautiful when one industry leader learns from another industry leader about the air they breathe, about what distinct little quirks of business they have, and things like that. Can you just shed a little light about how is being a leader of a media company different from, say, a leader in a tech sector or any other?
I think the big difference is just that sense of purpose, and I know that now it's the in vogue thing to say.
Yes.
It's the sexy thing to say is that what's your larger purpose. That wasn't always the case.
No.
I think whether it's an FMCG brand or whether it's a tech company or whether it's even an enterprise organization, even a SaaS service provider, whatever, they're all now saying what is our larger purpose, because they have discovered that when they find a larger purpose, it's easier to align the organization, it's easier to create loyalty amongst your employees, it makes the place distinctive, it decommoditizes where you are, it cuts through competition. And so these are the kind of things that every organization, every industry is talking about now. I think the thing about media is that this has always been the case with us.
That's true.
I mean, I really feel like, if I didn't grow up in Dadaji's house, if the walls didn't keep telling stories about him and what impact Express has had in India, in the world, I wouldn't be so passionate about it. I mean, there's no way. And if I wasn't so passionate about it, I wouldn't be working the way I sort of do for it. And so many people in the organization wouldn't be working the way that we do. I think so. I think that is I think the fundamental difference. I think today it is a trendy thing to do as good management to say find a higher purpose.
Gotcha.
For your organization. Maybe the next trend will be artificial intelligence, and then
Yes.
everybody in management talking about artificial intelligence. I think the one thing about media is that purpose is it's not going to be a trend. It's going to be really what kind of keeps us going and keeps us ticking, keeps us alive, keeps us relevant, keeps the organization together. And the fact that this that sense of purpose translates into a business. I must confess, when I joined the organization, I was quite skeptical about this. Because I've been hearing about this my whole life, and the mission, the values. And I was getting pucked with hearing about it so much. I felt it, right? I felt like any idea that was presented to me or to the board, to my dad, to anybody who came with a fresh idea, a partnership, anything interesting, unique, credibility, integrity. I said, it's becoming an excuse now not to do new things.
I so hear you.
So it was beginning to bother, and the amount of commercial opportunities you were losing constantly.
Sure. Yeah.
Just credibility, and you can't measure credibility beyond a point. You can't say, that's not tangible. It doesn't show up on the balance sheet.
Yeah.
But now I must say, I've been again 11 years, and I really feel like, thank God we were also anal about it, because it's paying off. It's been paying off for 80 years, but I'm seeing it pay off, especially through COVID. When COVID happened, it's one of the most, it was apocalyptic for everyone.
Absolutely.
And, I don't want to waste time talking about how scary and damaging for a news organization COVID was. But I can just tell you, as an employer, most employers probably were struggling to sleep.
Sure.
I was too.
Sure.
And you saw the users, suddenly that whole thing about what is that trusted source of news in this mad commoditized space? What is that trusted source of news? That question began coming. And you saw users choosing traditional news organizations in the digital format, sure.
Got it.
But they started looking for traditional news organizations because they needed trust at that particular point in time. The fight on the infodemic that happened, the infodemic that happened during COVID was won not by, that smartphone yielding, citizen journalists. It was won by the guys who had domain authority, the guys who had a name, the guys who had some kind of legacy and trust that was built into their brand. They won the infodemic battle. It wasn't won by the anonymous blogger.
Gotcha.
It wasn't won by that citizen journalist who we were all convinced would be our competition because he owns a smartphone. We all, as traditional media, benefited tremendously after COVID. Just because people sort of were seeking out, traditional sources, trusted sources of news and information. I think Express particularly stood out in that benefit. I mean, we had, so many data points to just show that, in the times of confusion, in the times of, people just having no faith in what they're consuming.
Sure.
They still there are enough people in India who still remember, value and trust and come to, a known news brand. We saw a lot of that happening. So I think the fact that good journalism is a good business, I'll be honest and say, I was always a little skeptical about it. You saw other organizations which did such terrible things, from a journalistic perspective, from a values perspective, and they were making so much money out of it all the time. And you just felt that, I could never live with myself if we did the kind of things that others did.
Sure.
But are we never going to be a good business was what I was kind of grappling with in my head. And today I can tell you that, it's actually translating to good business. Good journalism is good business. I have conviction in that today. It's taken me probably like 10 years to get there, but I have seen it now in my, I can touch and feel it.
Amazing.
To say there's enough data points to kind of show that.
No, actually, Anant, I can so wholeheartedly relate to that, because that flip between, is this just being conservatism? Are we not biting the bullet where it is? Is this just borderline, we've been doing things like this for the longest time, let's not try anything new kind of a thing? And you're yo-yoing between that and, the purpose, of the organization must have definitely not been an easy road to kind of traverse. So which, time-bound, uncertainty, infodemic, uncertainty, I need a hand that I can trust and believe in, and which is why organized press kind of led the path in saying that there's a lot of disinformation happening, so we are here, we've done our research, and trust us. That was then. Now, my question is the sheen and sexiness of traditional media, worn off? Is it still a sexy business at all? Number one. Number two, the elitism has really come down in the sense that, instant gratification, number one. Number two, I love the fact that you still need a guided voice to take you to the Rocky show, but I need multiple perspectives and I don't want to be guided by one school of thought. And unfortunately, media, it's common dinner conversations across the country in the state of the media in our country right now.
Yeah.
And it's very, very appalling, the amount of distrust globally and of course, nationally as well. And I'm just wondering, what's the way ahead?
The way ahead is not one where you think about your next quarter financial results. I think the problem of our times is polarization. The problem of my grandfather's time, you could say was emergency. You could say whatever. You could find a different zone and say. I think the problem of my time, of my generation, is this mad polarization. Where if you go to the United States today, you talk to a Fox News viewer, and you talk
100%.
to a CNN news consumer, you can't believe they're on the same planet, in the same country. It's like the same event, but the facts that this guy believes and the fact that guy believes are completely on different ends. But it's good business for them because they know they've defined their target audience in by ideology. And in America, and in fact in most countries, the monotheistic Abrahamic cultures, they have this binary. It makes business a lot easier because it's either this way or that way. In India, there's no this way. I mean, India's this is complete. It's very complicated.
That's a very interesting.
You can't cut the country in any one direction. And you'll always get factions will keep coming out of it. But it was, as a business, it's so easy. You just say, I'm left, I'm right. Decide where you are. Keep hammering. And it's a great business because the problem we've always had since you've been in our industry, is if somebody comes and asks a news organization who's the target audience, the answer would go on for weeks. Nobody can answer that. If you go to an HUL and say who's the target audience, you're doing Chauhan next, right? So you ask her target audiences, she'll say this SEC, this GEC. She'll just give you a full drawing right away.
Yes.
News organization, you have no idea. you can keep saying, I think is that you really have no clue.
Why? What makes the media business so unique?
Because you are a supermarket. You've always been one. And by the way, you have no clue who's reading the paper. Paper just kind of goes. Who does the paper go to? Paper goes to a hawker. You have no clue who the paper is actually going to, who's actually reading it. It goes to a home. You might have some survey that will tell you it's going to a home of a nuclear family or a joint family.
Sure.
But when it goes to that home, is it being read by the cook, the wife, the husband, the breadwinning wife, the breadwinning husband, the school-going kid? You have no idea.
All right. Anant, so that's the print. I'm talking about the digital world.
So traditionally in news, even in television, you had no clues reading you, who's consuming you. In news space, you have even less, funnily enough, you have even less of an idea about who's consuming you on digital.
Wow.
Because it just tilts towards who's online. If there are people under male under 35 is the majority of people online, that's the majority number of people who are going to, that's the majority of people who will be consuming your content. So you really don't know who's consuming news on any medium, anywhere in the world.
Wow.
What happened in this in this mad polarized world is that you were for the first time able to say, my target audience is the voter of Modi. My target audience is the guy who doesn't want to vote for Modi. My target audience is the guy who wants to vote for Trump. And that became, for the first time, gave, both editorial and business were able to align on a target audience. And then they were able to hammer at it. It's good business. For the short term, it's good business. Right? But it's fracturing society. It's tearing the country apart. America is unrecognizable from when I went there, when I was studying there, right? It's a fractured country. And it is a fractured country, I will say, in no small part. Because of news organizations.
200%.
For the New York Times to ask a sitting opinion editor to resign just because she decided to carry the opinion piece of a sitting senator, a Republican sitting senator, I think is shocking. And I can find parallels in my organization. When we had I sometimes do interviews myself and I enjoyed doing them, and I didn't ever intend to do something, but we had an adda with Yogi Adityanath. I was so shocked the kind of trolling I got. I get trolled all the time and that's fine. And that's, it's not a big deal. But the kind of trolling I got for even having invited him in the first place. Like, how can you invite Yogi and this and that? I said, man, we're a central market news organization. Please don't vote for him. You don't want to vote for him. But how can you say I shouldn't be even inviting him? It just doesn't, it just baffles the mind. You are, he is possibly the strongest elected chief minister, sitting at that particular point in time. He is Merkel, Boris Johnson and Macron combined
together
in terms of popular votes. Bloody well hear from him. Troll me if I don't ask him tough questions, by all means. But you can't tell me don't call him. So I'm saying you're seeing this polarization happen. In India, of course, it's happening.
Yeah, exactly.
And if the news organizations are going to pick a side, which they have been doing,
yes,
you're making it worse. And and we have a case in America how it has made it worse, and you're doing the same thing here. So I think, I do think, and I only anecdotal evidence to say this, but I do think that we have been trying to be that place where you choose, you get multiple sort of sources of information, voices that help you decide where you want to stand. You get the voice that you disagree with. We kind of forced you to kind of read the stuff that you don't agree with. And you kind of, it helps you make an informed decision. The point is, we're blaming news organizations, but news organizations will turn back and blame the algos.
Yeah.
They'll go and say that, you consume one article supporting Trump, you'll get another article supporting Trump. And there's an old argument, so I don't want to waste too much time on that. But I think news organizations have kind of used that as a way to wash away their responsibility about how they've also played into it. I think that one of the reasons we stand out is that we don't fall for that. It's very easy to. And I know that we have lost a lot of sort of fans, readers. I would say even some journalists. We have lost a lot of people who think that we, should be taking a strong position one way and not giving space to the other side, whichever side that is. I'm just giving.
Sure.
But I think in the long run, this is the way to be. This is how you can, and we are differentiated today because we're the only guys doing it.
I think something very, very important is disengagement is not an answer. I mean, you will have to engage with people who might not agree with your point of view, and that's the beauty of a news organization. I go back to Voltaire, if I'm correct, who said, I might not agree with your opinion, but I'll fight, to give you that right. I'll fight to my death to ensure that you still have that right. And I think that's a beautiful kind of a motto for a news organization as well. When you were getting trolled for having a chat with Yogi Adityanath, you can disengage, but disengagement is not the answer, right? There could be disagreements between ideology, between what your brand stands for and whatever. But I think you got to engage. You got to have tark vitark, if you can call it that, to forge a path ahead.
And just answering your original question, you asked me, is it as sexy as it was back in the day? And I think the answer is, it's a great question actually, and I don't know what sexy really means in this space.
Can replace it with romance. Is it romantic? Because the idea of saving the world, one person at a time, one tribe at a time, one organization at a time, or one small ecosystem is a very romantic notion for a human being.
Yes.
It transcends all your other aspects of, playing a part in this ecosystem that we are in. And that's why it's romantic. This is one of the means of sometimes vicariously kind of living that dream. Which is why.
Okay, so is it sexy as somebody in the news space, as somebody sitting inside the news organization?
Why should a 21-year-old join a news organization today, in today's time?
If a 21-year-old wants to be part of societal impact, changing the world, I think there's no place like a news organization.
Even now?
Even today.
That's the question.
No question about it. Once you're inside. From the outside, does it feel as sexy as it used to feel in the 70s and the 80s?
Yeah.
That's not an easy answer. I don't think that's a clear yes. And there's a reason for why it's not. And it's our job to kind of make it sexy, like it used to be. It's certainly our job to do that. And the reason we haven't been, doing it, I think, is because we are not speaking in a language that is with it. And it's our fault for not doing that. If I were to walk around any newspaper company and ask the most experienced, the best, meaning when I say best, I mean the reporters who've broken the best stories, who've done the best exclusive stuff, how many of them have an Instagram account? You'll be surprised with the number you'll get. It'll be very few.
Sure.
It'll be very few.
Sure.
And, there's this kind of sort of theory I've kind of been working around, but if you draw a spectrum of all the content you've consumed, right? On the one end of the spectrum is the box office. On the other end of the spectrum is academia. Okay, I'm just painting one straight line. One end is box office, which is your Rohit Shetty, your Sunny Leone, or whatever's box office. Just works for mass. Other end is academia. That one dissertation which will be read by 30 people over the next 5 years, If you just draw a straight line and just think about each and every piece of content you've consumed and plot it somewhere on this spectrum, the newspaper kind of, used to be closer to the box office in the 70s and 80s, and maybe now has moved closer to the academic side. But we have to find that sweet spot where, that's our challenge. We have to find that sweet spot where we are intelligent, we are adding value, we're not dumbing down, but we're also reaching a critical mass to have that impact. If you look at Shakespeare today, Shakespeare is academia.
Yeah.
You go back to when Shakespeare was alive, he was box office.
100%.
Shakespeare, there will be lines outside, people to, get tickets and go and watch Shakespeare. What made Shakespeare go from box office to academia? It's not his story. His story is still being told.
Of course.
I don't know if you've seen Succession.
Everybody's raving away.
It's classic Shakespearean
Correct.
plot.
Yeah.
Everything that does, there's so much of Shakespeare in the most popular movies, popular books, popular anything. It's all Shakespeare. So in a sense, the story hasn't changed so much. The story is still appealing.
Absolutely.
What's changed is that the characters, the way they dress, the way they talk,
the setting,
is not relevant to the audience today. So what happens is he's kind of gotten relegated now to academia, right? But his story is still the same. So it's similar with journalism. People still want to, I don't think people don't want to, people still need to know, they want to know about what's happening in the world around them. There are some who don't.
That's a pretty big one. They need to know, but do they want to know is a very, very is a pet peeve with me.
I think that's important, and we should spend more time on that.
Yeah.
But there is enough people who do want. Let's just for a second assume there is enough people who do want to know.
All right.
But if you make it so difficult for them, or you make it so unreadable for them the way you say it, whether it is the language you use in your newspaper or the language you use on your Instagram reel, it is still language.
Yes.
Which is a little bit not with it.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where we sort of seem to be pushing ourselves towards the academia side. It's a hard challenge to, tell the reader, this bus collapsed on so-and-so highway. Why should you care about it?
Beautiful.
Very tough to do. But that's the challenge. And if we don't do that, why should you care about that MLA who was caught with a bribe? Why should you care about... And, it's tough, but it's not as difficult as it sounds. I'll tell you on climate change. We've done a lot of reporting on climate change here. Okay, not climate change. Let me take an easy example. We've done a lot of reporting on the environment. Pet subject of mine now becoming, because if it isn't, then I have a 3.5-year-old. So anybody with a small kid in Bombay thinks about 200%. Environment. You see what happened in the winter this year, you'll be shocked. Report, constantly done thing that IIT professor has read and has shared in his community and this and that, but it was never hitting the charts in terms of the most read article. And I was like, but this is concerning everybody. Why is it not sort of getting the thing? And it was because obviously we're not saying it in a way which is easy. It's so much jargon,
it's complex,
environment, it's complex. Even to explain what PM 2.5 versus PM 10 is, it's not easy right away. But if I break it down and tell you that when India was independent, our average life expectancy was 42 years. Our life expectancy in India today is 78 years. The life expectancy of somebody who lives in Deonar, which is the largest landfill in Mumbai, is 40 years.
Wow.
Now you pay attention.
Of course.
Why do you pay attention? Because I've told it to you in a way which you suddenly relate.
Yeah.
I brought that tough subject back into the box office. We have to go into the craft of the writing, the craft of the journalism, and re-engineer it and do surgery about how we've been doing it for all these years to make it box office. This now have your attention. Now I can tell you the reason this happens is because in Deonar, we've got a sanitary pad, a disposed single-use plastic bottle, a banana peel, all sitting, composting together on top of it, releasing gases which really by 2023 should not be allowed to happen. Right? Everywhere, most modern cities have been able to at least segregate organic waste from... We haven't. And a used cell phone. Let me throw used cell phone into that mix. All sits on top of each other. It's so toxic what you're consuming. And so you're, as a country, if you're living in Deonar, you're back to the 40s.
Sure. Yeah.
Tough subject, but you have to do it, and you can't.
Anant, I think this is so important because storytelling is a very, very important aspect of what I help CXOs with, and it's so fascinating that I thought I would leave with ways that other organizations and leaders can learn about storytelling from media enterprises. Right?
I think that's our challenge. It's not as difficult a challenge as it sounds, but it also will require a lot of effort and energy. And there are people who've done it. There are people who've done a very good job with it. But they haven't done it in a manner which is financially sustainable yet. And that's where I think we have a bit of a headroom to experiment, because our core business, the newspaper business. Just, you didn't ask, but I'm telling you anyway. We are possibly the only English newspaper which is selling more copies post-COVID than we were selling pre-COVID.
Wow.
Because that word trust, that's why I have faith in that word trust
Nice.
now. And I have faith in that turning the business model, because I know there are so many people in cities like Patna, Indore, Lucknow, cities where we were not very strong. Our presence as an English paper was like very, very minimal.
Yeah.
Where they have actually swapped from their existing English paper to Express,
Nice.
through COVID. Because somehow that e-paper sampling just happened at a very rapid thing during COVID when there were no papers coming. And so we have that headroom, because as a print business, it's a good business. The print business is a good core business too, that you're still in. And I don't really feel it's going to go anywhere.
Nice.
Maybe there will be a different print will evolve. Maybe finally we'll be charging a higher cover price.
Yeah.
But I don't see the newspapers dying,
No, which has been a pipe dream for many businesses in terms of saying that how much will we sacrifice editorial interest in the interest of commercial, deals.
That's the
And
thing,
that's
yeah.
like
Once you make
it's
that
as
thing, then
old
you're
as the
playing for
deal.
once you make that
Yeah.
compromise, then you're playing for the short term, is what I
Correct.
think.
Yeah.
But listen, I mean, there are other news organizations, I won't name them, that's not fair, but who have done a tremendous job about being sort of growing and growing and growing. So
Sure. Yeah.
so you don't know, but again, if we were to do that, we would not survive, because then you're neither here nor there.
100%.
So I'm saying that the values that Ramnaji had, that the organization kind of feels, yes, that is the way I would like to live my life, and I would like the organization to live its life. But it's also a good business now, because every other way of doing it has been taken by others. So we're kind of now forced, as a business, we're kind of forced into this corner, which is actually a good lucrative corner for us to sit in this crowded space and kind of, be a good, growing, sustainable business.
Lovely. You began by saying, the interesting conversation that you had with your father and the editor and the CEO about personifying the reader and why is the voice of the consumer not being heard. And I'm hearing that in conjunction with another observation where you're talking to a journalist, senior, junior, whatever, and you're asking, what's your Instagram handle? And they're like, no, I might not have, or I might barely be there, which is again elitism or out of touch in a way to speak, right? Because
100%.
you spoke about the range of interests that you spoke about at the beginning. It could be about polarization. It could be about climate change. It could be about it should be about conversations that are real now and young in nature. And is somewhere the journalism out of touch in that sense of communicating with the consumer?
Yeah. I mean, it is like telling the consumer that I know what you should be consuming, and having no humility for what the consumer wants, and then kind of trying to level. I think this is the biggest challenge for news organizations and for any whole organization, to be humble to respond to what the consumer is looking for and wanting, because we know that the consumer isn't sort of in a sense, the consumer, the reader of news, isn't always right. His or her opinion isn't the right opinion,
100%,
right?
100%.
But you still have to have humility for the fact that this is the opinion, and the opinion could be something about a particular chief minister, a particular party being good for their thing, or the opinion could be about the fact that they decide that they don't want to read sort of the Financial Express's analysis of economic survey before the budget. Even that is an opinion that they're exercising. They're saying it's not worth my time to read about the economic survey before the budget.
Sure.
And if you don't convince them that it's important to read because it will affect them by X, Y, Z, then you're failing at your job, and they will lose interest and not read you. So that's the dynamic of our business. I said something earlier which you kind of stopped and kind of wanted to challenge, and I, we can get into a little bit more, because it's something which I'm contradicting myself, but it's also true. Is that there is this feeling, I feel, amongst a lot of people now, who they just don't care. They just disengaged from anything that doesn't immediately concern them. but doesn't concern me, doesn't concern my family, doesn't concern my kid, doesn't concern me and my workplace and my job. There's also a growing cohort of people who are just like, it doesn't concern me, I don't want to know.
Sure.
I just don't care.
Sure.
My life chal raha hai, let it
Yes.
just kind of go on.
Yeah.
I think we've got, if you can break up India in these two cohorts, one that is more engaged and one that's less engaged, both
Right.
are growing cohorts, but they both exist.
I do. I agree completely.
And as a percentage of population, the uninterested cohort has also grown.
Sure.
I think when independence and when we, all that happened, everybody was engaged. Not one person didn't have a political view, right?
Yeah.
Everybody was fully like, and every column centimeter of any national newspaper, one word here and there would cause havoc. And so that's also happening. And I think maybe it's very interesting when, you think about the fact that when independence happened, there are a lot of people who didn't have a lot of money. They didn't have, really, they had so many struggles that, just everyday life was so difficult. Yet they all put their lives on the line to fight for civil liberties. I'm talking even post-independence.
Sure.
They fought for civil liberties. They marched, they went hungry, they would take on, strong political leaders, any leader, to fight for saying, freedom, whether it's freedom of speech or whether it's just freedom of life, they fought for it. The word, I don't like the word uneducated because I think we think of it differently in India and how it means, but uneducated people put their lives on the line for civil liberties back in the 40s and 50s. Today, when we're a far more prosperous nation, we're a far more comfortable country than we were then, and the people who are far more affluent, they don't seem to be very invested in fighting for civil liberties.
You seem to think this is paradoxical.
I don't get it. I don't really get it. You're the life coach. You tell me. But I feel like, and maybe it's because the fact that there is a feeling that we needed the freedoms to achieve affluence or to achieve this comfort. Now that we've got it, we don't really care for it anymore.
So there is a sense of, great calamities bring communities together because there is a sense of unison. There is a sense of saying that I'm in the same boat as you. I don't have a bigger, better boat. I'm in practically the same boat, number one. Number two, if I do not join in this struggle, like climate change right now, if I don't engage, then what are we fighting for? Because everybody is going to get affected. So that sense of purpose also joins in. But more importantly, along with affluence, globally, this is also a thing. You tend to become more self-centered. And I remember reading somewhere, apathy is the last stage in the relationship. You can have conversations, you can have bitter debates, but when you are apathetic, that's it. That's the death knell of a relationship. And our relationship with our ecosystem is reeking of apathy right now. And, this entire conversation of media showing a mirror to society and society showing a mirror to media has been a very, very long story.
Yeah.
But I think somewhere along the line, why I go back to the fact that it's romantic is, it is the job of an organization / institution to say, look, I am with you on this path. I will give you more education. I'll give you more information. I'll influence you to act so that it's better. You emerge with the ability to make an informed decision.
Yeah.
And that's really, really vital. I remember you talking about citizen journalists, right? If I go into the madding crowd of Twitter, as you do sometimes and I do sometimes, it's number one, it's vitriolic. Number two is like, really, there's only so much of fact checking that you can do in your life. And ironically, in this time and age, I read somewhere, before the truth can get its pants on, the lie has made its way half across the world. Narrative is winning over truth. And it is a fact of life, isn't it? Back to the 70s or whatever, limited source of information, the written word was holy. We're like, yes, I subscribe to this. I believe this individual, this byline, I believe in it, and it just espouses a lot of my values. But now, it's really hard to get that kind of engagement.
Yeah. But again, like I said, there are two cohorts. So there is the other side that is more engaged than it was earlier. And that engagement is coming from two levels.
Let's talk about that cohort.
That cohort is the one who say, boss, I want to go into a job interview and impress. I want to go into a networking event, whatever the
Sure.
hell, and be the smartest guy in the room. And they are unable to achieve that by being, the monkey on the
Sure.
monkey on their phone's algo. They're unable to achieve that by being victim of these algos. They have to achieve that by being proactive in what they're consuming. What you consume shapes how you think.
100%.
And what you share is a big expression of identity.
200%.
And the one thing which is important today, more than it was in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, is identity. All we do is identity right now. We keep expressing identity.
Beautiful.
Whether we're posting, what cell phone we're carrying, are you an Android guy, you're an Apple guy?
It starts there.
But I've seen brands, and I, as you can see, I have no sense of fashion. But if you're, it's not enough to be wearing. Can somebody name a brand? A Louis Vuitton shoe, right? Are you wearing a Louis Vuitton athleisure shoe, or are you wearing a Louis Vuitton leather formal shoe? Or are you wearing this patent leather shiny Louis Vuitton shoe? Everything is an expression of identity now.
Sure.
Right? In Bombay, whether you're speaking English or Hindi or Marathi is a huge expression. Language is, by the way, all identity now. Language has nothing to do with communication anymore.
Sure.
But in Bombay, are you coming from Hughes Road? Are you coming from Hughes Road? Is an expression of identity.
Gotcha.
And so we're constant. And so if you're able to express identity as somebody who's seeking, who's curious, who's informed, who's intelligent, that's that cohort which I think is a growing cohort. The point is, where I think is a little bit different, is that I'm not sure that cohort has the conviction that their world will be a better place because they're informed. I think they think that being informed is a means of getting ahead.
Beautiful distinction.
In a superficial manner.
Yeah.
And so that's what. But again, I mean, we have to still fall back on the fact that there are more people who are engaged. And there is also a bunch of people in that growing cohort who are angry, who are frustrated,
Yep.
and they engage from that perspective.
Yep.
So all of this, keeps the business going and growing though.
No, I think it's very anecdotal, right? I'm sure you must have been in so many conversations with friends, colleagues, acquaintances. For a second, let's forget that you're in the media business and, this is pretty much, your domain and your turf. There is a lot of political polarization. Conversations have again become the mainstay of dinner table conversations or catch up with friends. Victimization happens, identification happens, polarization happens. Are we living in interesting times, or are we living in vicariously sick times that, however perverse it might look like, we're standing by and watching the, pardon my French, shit show?
I think polarization is the problem of our time. So I definitely think that I think being objective and looking from the outside, I think certainly it is a bit of a shit show, the way society, the place society is headed. I think we're all kind of, becoming so obsessed with sort of that expression of identity, that how many followers we have on Instagram, and who's done the cooler thing, and what is cool in the first place is becoming so superficial compared to what it probably was, 20, 30 years ago. So there is that, but there is also, it's also a very individual answer.
It is.
It's a very what do you want to see?
Yeah.
If you want to see the people who have, become, spiritually deeper than they were 2 years ago. You want to engage with the people who
Fantastic.
are being part of the solutions and not complaining about the
yeah.
problems. You want to be part of the people who are, wearing sustainable clothing rather than what's the latest trend and posting it on Instagram. It's all there for you to sort of pick and choose from and kind of see and be inspired by.
No, I think I think
the problem, these trends will ebb and flow. Right now, I think a lot of fashion is a very powerful thing, right? Anywhere in the world,
Yeah.
and in any field, what is fashionable, what isn't fashionable, decides a lot about how you and I do things that we do. I think a lot of the economic power of the world today is coming from the Middle East, and you see that in in what is trendy today. I mean, my father collects cars,
Of
and
course.
he's this big, this incredible sort of restorer, and he just loves cars. You take the best the most prized sort of brand of cars ever. You say a Rolls Royce, right? You look at a Rolls Royce, look at a Bentley. You take a Rolls Royce and a Bentley of the 30s, 50s, 70s, 80s. It was elegance. It was classy. It was this. The market was people who had that, that aesthetic. They were a business, so they were kind of catering to that. The market today for the Rolls Royce are all is that Middle Eastern buyer who's trying to sort of outspend their next neighbor or
Bling,
whatever.
bling.
I don't know. It's so bling 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 is all what is in vogue today. It bothers me. It certainly it hurts. It hurts the eye. It's unnecessary. It's wasteful.
Conspicuous consumption.
And it is so damaging to the environment, which we all claim is a big problem that the world faces today. Yet we're kind of going down this. So certainly it all bothers me. But it's up to you and me individually whether you want to look at that or do you want to look at, the guys who are making the difference, the guys who are doing better. It's a very individual call to make. And the beauty about India is that with such a large population, 1.2 billion people, you can immerse yourself for your entire life
200%.
in any micro niche, micro sort of cohort and kind of, feel like your world is getting better or worse. Up to you.
No, I think beautiful. I think meaning making is completely up to us as individuals, right?
Yeah.
And you said, rightly that, it could be a shit show, but then when you find meaning in stuff that replenishes and rejuvenates you, like spirituality, for instance, I think that's a great way forward.
Yeah.
Amazing. Another last question, or, we can definitely keep talking. That's not this thing. There comes a plateau in an organizational leader's kind of trajectory because there is low hunger. At some point in time, like, okay, all right, we are done, we are good, kind of a thing. And what would you like to leave them with? If somebody has a challenge like that, if they're looking at their boxes and saying, okay, where is my hunger? There's no hunger now. Because as it is, we are living in the age of abundance in the sense that our kids definitely have much better lives than we had, and so on. There is that quest that one needs to go on to fire. It could be fire in the belly, or develop the ability to impact or create greater value for society. How would you advise that individual to start working or relook at the world?
Yeah, this is a question for somebody who's way spiritually deeper than I am, or kind of gets it more, because I have been very blessed with that sense of purpose from a very early age. So every problem for me was an exciting opportunity, and I kind of every morning kind of wake up with a bit of a spring in my feet, and I was very happy with the more problems the better. In a sense, I'm not, for God's sake, I don't want to invite more problems and so on into the universe, but I'm just saying that that sense of purpose is such an anchoring thing to my daily life, and I can't imagine life without it, and I've never had to. So, I'm struggled to answer this because I feel like if you don't find that larger purpose, I actually don't know how I don't know how to function without it. I'm blessed to have probably been sort of felt a sense of purpose at a very early age. I really feel like there are lots of things that can be a purpose and people can fight for, can feel passionately for. So many things.
Sure.
We discussed all of them in the course of this. And they don't have to be these large global things. 200%. They can be small things, I was in Punjab during the election time, and I was driving around. I've seen a lot of the state, a lot of the city, a lot of the small cities around Punjab. And literally I was like, it's so interesting. There is this whole Punjabi sort of problem, the political problem right now in Punjab. There's mad drugs,
absolutely,
unemployment, and kind of what happened was, so it's very interesting. One of the things, and it's a diversion because you allow me to divert.
No worries, please go for it.
I was driving on this one stretch of road, and I kept saying, chapel, 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 chapel. I was like, what is happening? Like, how can there be so many churches in this rural part of Punjab? I was just very surprised by it.
All right.
And so I stopped and I went in and I saw, that that real, I don't know if you've seen these videos in Africa, these real like loony kind of, like you're cured of cancer, hallelujah. That kind of
okay. Evangelical.
that very evangelical kind of a sort of, a very sort of not, it was a little bizarre to kind of see. And you see these proper Sikh turban wearing pastors in this funny Punjabi accent saying hallelujah, hallelujah. It was really exciting. I wish I had a video camera or whatever. I had to go video
this is as outlandish as it can
It's bizarre.
get.
It was really, it was like, like the old Africa visuals. It was like very much like that. And so
the image of Sardar.
Absolutely. It was and we done thing about it. I just kept wanting to go deeper into this. But what is happening here? So there are lots of things happening. One of the things that's happening is that everybody in Punjab wants to send one child to Canada. Canada. So one child has to go to Canada.
Sure, Canada.
How do you go to Canada? You want to get if you speak English, you'll be better off in Canada.
Sure.
The only place where you can learn English for cheap is in a
convent.
A convent school.
Right.
So you join a church, you're able to go to the convent school for cheap, subsidized, whatever. You learn your English, you can go to Canada. Fine, do it. And that's one of the things. But then you look at the larger reason you're seeing this. When Punjab has gone through so much, terrorism, all kinds of the drug situation, and there's complete joblessness. But there was also, nobody's really hungry. Because it's the agricultural part.
Exactly.
It was just always grain.
Like the oil rich, this is the land rich.
So there's always food, right? So you have people who are not starving, but they were jobless. There's, in a sense, prosperity, but you're jobless. Inequity, but if you see a Punjabi farmer, like a 2-acre, 3-acre owner, whatever, and you see like 100-acre,
sure,
you just look at the guy, you take a photo like this, you can't tell. I mean, they're strong, they're just solid guys. So maybe if you look at the car they drive or the watch they wear, then you start seeing the differences. But otherwise, I started getting this whole thing about why this church, explosion of churches, right? And you see that there was this need for purpose that I felt people needed in Punjab because there was no job. There was prosperity. There was you have the time to think. So there was this kind of thing, all these deras are kind of opened up all over, right? And, you had the Ram Rahim, he was a dera Sacha Shauda. There were small deras around. So what happens is people kind of just go and they're looking for something and then they get kind of caught in this, like Ram Rahim kind of guys become their god. And they say, you'll have a kid now and I've blessed you. And, all that kind of, the loony part of religiousness that you kind of saw that happening there.
Right.
You found that the SGPC at that time decided to crack down on this. This is giving Sikhism a bad name.
Sure.
They cracked down on all the loony deras. But the demand for it was so strong that you had a whole sect of missionary sort of churches now springing to feed into that demand.
Wow.
So I'm just a bizarre example, but I'm just giving an example about how, an entire state, just look at what happens when you don't have that sense of purpose. Just look what's going on here. Now, these deras have been controlled. They're doing what the old way of Sikhism, whatever they do, they're doing it the way they're supposed to, I guess. I don't know. But the demand is so strong when you just feel like you don't have any anchor purpose.
Coming in,
that you have this whole sort of wave coming in. And if you tell a reporter, they'll say, it's basically because they get cheaper English education. So much so. But the demand for English education is so strong there that I have driven in such rural, like nothing is happening. Suddenly you'll see a building up and it says convent school. But where is the church connected to this? There's no church. They just use the word convent as a way to say English. So convent is English.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, so you can get distracted by that short-term business thing. But the larger human spiritual problem is that whole state is looking for a purpose. Right? And because they aren't finding one, it's a border state. There's no jobs. The drugs just flow through.
Completely.
We have done investigations. We've done a 6-part series. The amount, in a jail, a drug rehabilitation jail, we have gone and found syringes on the floor, of cells where you can't, like people have no interaction and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's such a problem. Like, the whole generation in Punjab has been lost to drugs.
Oh my God.
And it's fundamentally what's your purpose? There's no sense of purpose. I think it's so important here. And we have to all go through that journey of looking for one, finding it, I just find that I find that anchor really helps in just making life a fun, fulfilling, ever growing journey.
Gotcha.
Storytelling का मतलब क्या होता है?
So what happens is like there are so many organizations and there are so many leaders, and especially in the day of great tech, they're not able to craft a great narrative around their brand, product, or experience. And this is where, if the cameras are running, so be it, which is where I come in, and that puts bread on my table because that is something that I help them craft and work on. And it is becoming increasingly important for CXOs today to be able to use that. If they're asking their team for a moonshot, if they're asking their team to stretch and buy into the vision and buy into the purpose, because your stakes as a founder is way higher than their stakes, but you want to get them on to the same engine. So storytelling is becoming really, really important globally and even within Indian leaders. So my segue to that was, where can organizations learn the craft, if not from the media business? Because the media business has been telling stories for years and years together. And these are stories that are not just nice to hear, but they result in great impact, which is like it goes full circle, right? You start a story, you start a movement, makes an impact, comes back, and then starts another story. So it just kind of feeds into the other. And I thought that was a fascinating space for us to kind of spend some time.
Yeah. And I think this is where news organizations particularly, and I would express no exception to this, we fail also like any other organization because, I don't think our tech team, our 50% strong developer engineering team reads the Express every day.
Wow.
And, I think that'd be the case in most organizations, right?
I can tell you about another organization where they were not consuming their own content, which means if you're not convincing, if you're not consuming
you
your
don't feel for the
product,
passion, you don't have any of that.
How will you be able to? Yeah, absolutely.
And honestly, Jay, I don't know the solution to this. It's a long process. It's our failure as content creators that they're not consuming it, sure. But now, again, the problem in India is such a diverse country. Half of them don't read English, they don't speak English.
Sure.
So you're already lost. I mean, the Indian Express, how do you really?
Yeah.
And the other problem is that they're part of that gang who's just not interested.
Apathy.
They just want to be the developer. They want to learn the next language, and they're that's. So it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one. And I feel like if the tech team doesn't feel as passionately for our mission, our values, and doesn't really live it the way that our journalists do, we're going to be short on the user experience.
Completely.
Which is going to make us not deliver the value to the user like we should be. So ye pura hai, matlab, there is a problem. And it's a great space to be because I think it's a problem that cuts across all industries. So it's a great space for you to be.
Excellent. And before we started the conversation, we were reading a quote. There was Harold Levins, is it?
Harold Evans, yeah.
Harold Evans. And it was a very interesting line which said, the time for the quiet byline is over. People want to follow people who they read. And I think that's such a beautiful element of humanization, right? Yeah. So to that extent, I might not follow editorial or media brands as much as I follow a particular reporter.
Yes.
In that age of personal branding,
yes.
why isn't the media start consuming its own Kool-Aid? So all the journalists have to become great personal storytellers. They need to build great personal brands. What do you think seems to be coming in the way?
Culture. It's fundamentally culture. The guys who are obsessed with their social media identity are people who don't think about the institution beyond a point too much. I'm just making a very generalization.
Sure,
not. I mean, I can tell you exceptions the moment I think of them. I mean, as I'm saying, I can tell you of exceptions. I'll give you an exception is Ross Atkins, somebody I followed. He does explanatory journalism on BBC News in UK. Super anchor, great following on Twitter, Instagram, which he has spent time building. But he's always been very clear ki BBC is my identity.
Wow.
Right? And so my following on social media, at least it seems to me from the outside, I don't know him personally, it seems to me that his identity on social media is a means to push his journalism, which he's empowered to do because he's carrying the BBC card. So that's great. That's how it should be, ideally. But I think in India, we end up in a situation, and all over the world, actually, we end up in a situation where, I am my brand. And, I have to be loyal to my audience, not the institution, not the institution's audience, but my audience.
But who are you without the institution that?
That's what this.
Am I a personal influencer? That's a different thing. I mean,
yeah.
let's say if there is an editorial or journalist or who like, hey, listen, I love tennis, and that's my pastime. That has nothing to do with where I work. Of course, right? I mean, that will not be like a conflict of interest.
No.
But I'm saying, when people read my content, I'm just imagining an alternative career as somebody who writes, and writing for me is very intoxicating, very heady. It moves me in a lot of ways, and I know how difficult it is. And when they find somebody who connects with that piece, I've written to editors, I've written to reporters saying that what you wrote mattered to me. How did you know what I was thinking? And that person immediately calls me back or writes back to me, because this kind of feedback is what makes them get up the next day and puts that pep in their step. Why are India's leading storytellers not engaging with their audiences?
I think there is that again, that whole feeling that the leading storytellers aren't with it right now. They don't really, and if they are with it, Thomas Friedman at our Express Adda many years ago, he made a very interesting. He said, "Boss, I can call anybody in the world today, and they'll pick up the phone and talk to me because I say I'm Thomas Friedman calling from the New York Times. If I were to say I'm Thomas Friedman calling from thomasfriedman.com, I wouldn't get half the people answering my calls." And I think that you're seeing that play out. It's a lot of effort to build a personal identity on social media. It's not as easy as it sounds.
Sure,
especially if you're not like, if it doesn't come organically to you. If you're not a digital native, if you're not grown up in that world, if you're not somebody who's like constantly like used to sharing and being authentic, and being inauthentic, we need to be inauthentic. It's not easy, yeah. And if you feel like, I have so many conversations with some great editors at the Express, the one thing they value the most, and that's what makes them people who are able to sit behind a desk every night and like edit copy and not get any credit for it anywhere, is that they value their anonymity. They really think there is a premium, and they love their anonymity. They thrive on it. They like the fact that they're invisible, but they're so influential and impactful. So that's the animal that keeps the newspaper going.
I get that. Yeah. I so get that. Yeah. But that apart, is there anything else that you can think about? No. This is pretty much.
Yeah, I think also that doesn't come. It's just like, for me, I got onto Instagram. Either way, if you leave it to me, I would not be on any social media platform. I would be listening to ghazals and reading newspapers every morning, and I would not have a cell phone. If you just leave me to my.
Unfortunately, nobody can
be that way. I don't want, and my FOMO sort of is so high that I'm doing all of this and trying to just be authentic to it rather than, but larger picture is that I've really struggled with figuring out how to communicate on Instagram versus Twitter. Which is a much more visual medium. It's a much more, I don't know, it's somehow like the person I am, if I'm being authentic, and I struggle not to be authentic. And I really cherish the fact that I struggle not to be authentic.
Sure.
So just for Instagram
followers. That's a good struggle to be.
Exactly. So I don't want to become inauthentic because I want to grow Instagram. But if I see most of the people who I follow who have got huge followings on Instagram, you can make out, over the years, you can make out that there's a certain sense of
dissonance.
You're kind of putting yourself on stage. Every place is a stage. Your bedroom is a stage. Your hall is a stage. Dining table is a stage. You cannot be authentic. I don't know what it would be like to be like that every day. I can't do it. I respect those who can, but I can't do it.
It's tiresome. It's different courses for different folks, I guess.
There was a guy who threw a dog off a roof in Bangalore. I don't know. I'm sure people remember this because it was like all over the news for like 6-7 days.
Yeah.
There was this video. There's this guy who's kind of like flung a dog off the roof. And the camera kept following the dog as it fell down, and the dog's tail was wagging till the very end.
God.
And everybody was like so shocked. And this guy who threw the dog was smiling and laughing, and So I went to this guy, Swami Swatmanand. He runs the Chinmayan Mission, Bombay. He was the chief in Bombay. So I went to him and I said, Swamiji, what makes a man so sadistic to take an innocent animal who's licking you and just throw it up and smile while the guy falls? He said, Anant, you know what? You're making a mistake. His act wasn't to throw a dog off a roof. Right? His act was to be videoed throwing a dog off a roof. If there was no camera there, he wouldn't have been doing it. Right? So I mean, I thought that was a very profound thing to say, and that too, like 5-6 years ago. It just shows that this need for attention, this need for social media validation, etc., it can get the best of us. It's gotten world leaders stuck. It's gotten journalists stuck.
100%.
I have no shame in saying that. I look and see. I did an interview. Why has it gotten only 100,000 views? Where Beer Biceps has gotten 1 million views of the same interview. My interview is better. Why did he get? It's very tough for that not to kind of thing.
It does.
So it's not. I don't know. I don't think it comes naturally to everyone.
And I love the fact that you said you struggle with your need to be authentic on these platforms, and I think it's the fact that you're struggling is a good sign. It's there's still hope, and well, that brings us to the end of our conversation, Anant. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was beautiful.
Cool.
Like I said, it was a meandering but a very, very deep and riveting conversation. I completely enjoyed. It was like catching up with an old friend.
Yeah.
I really loved it. Thank you so
Great.
much.
Thank you so much. Good luck.
Awesome. Thank you.